You are listening to the Novel Writing Podcast, episode 224. I'm your host, Colleen Mitchell. Grab a cup, cozy up, and let's get to writing. Today I want to touch on why it's important to have a writing group. Humans are social creatures. We need community to thrive, and because writing is a very solitary endeavor, having a writing group to cheer you on and hold you accountable is so essential. If you're listening to this in real time, this episode is more than a day late because I just got back from the annual Realm Makers Conference for Christian authors of sci-fi and fantasy books. I would say Realm Makers is my main community. It encompasses other authors who not only write in the same genre as I do, but we also share something more important, our worldview. My critique groups are made up of Realmies, which means their feedback is more valuable because of that shared worldview. They know the messages I'm trying to convey underneath the words and will tell me if I've missed the mark. So if you've never been part of a writing group or a bigger community like Realm Makers, here are several points as to why it's important to find one. Number one, it's a reminder that you're not alone. It is super common to drift as a writer, thinking you're the only one who's contemplating mind-bending time travel paradox questions, only to realize you aren't alone the moment you find yourself in a packed panel discussing those exact topics. And yes, that very thing happened this year at Realm Makers. I remember going to my first Realm Makers Con last year and realizing before I even arrived that these people are my people. And that was mostly because a Realmie approached me during my layover in the Denver airport after noticing my sweatshirt and hat, both of which were Christian themed, and she basically adopted me. So Michaela, if you're listening, I love you. Once you have a group of people who you connect with and whose writing or reading interests align with yours, it's highly likely that they will be the group you come up with, or who grow with you through your combined journeys as writers. If you go to enough writing conferences or hear enough successful authors give talks, you'll hear them talk about other writers they came up with. And that leads to point number 2, accountability. It's easy to get into a rut when you don't have other writers asking how the writing is going, or expecting a new chapter submission on a somewhat regular critique schedule. It's one thing for your family or friends to ask how the book is coming, but quite another when the question comes from a writing group who collectively has your professional interests in mind. As well-meaning as Grandma is, Grandma asking how the writing's coming usually won't kick our writer butts into gear. Don't see accountability as a scary word, though. All great writers have some form of accountability, whether it's their writing group, a book coach, their expectant readers, or an internal sense of duty to finish the story because it matters to them more than it matters to get it into someone else's hands. That's where I started. My first motivation to publish Mark of Stars was so I could hold it in my hands. If other people read it, that would be amazing, but it was primarily because I needed to get the story out of my head and hold an actual book in my hands. That person or group of people that you join as your writing group can be the difference between publishing your book and not. Number 3, improving your craft. I feel like I harp on this a lot, but one of the fastest ways to improve your writing skills is to critique other people's work. Writing groups is where this happens. Not all writing groups have critique functions, but I'd say that most do. The issues we spot in each other's writing help us see those same issues in our own work. The final book in the Chronicles of Talam Quartet, The Last Horizon, which is finally out, thank God, is the first of my books to go through this kind of intense scrutiny on a chapter-by-chapter basis in my writing group, and until I wrote the villain backstory, it was my best work. Witch Queen, the villain backstory, had a similar feedback cycle, and I can now say at this moment that it is my best work so far. When you have a good feedback cycle, each next book has the potential to be your best. Of course, you can improve your craft through reading craft books and applying what you learn to your drafts and your rewrites, but if I had to choose between craft books and a writing group, I'd choose the writing group, as long as it's full of people who aren't afraid to hurt my feelings and are similarly dedicated to excellent writing. And number 4, friends who become like family. This is similar to knowing you're not alone, but when you're in a small, intimate writing group for long enough, you get to know each other well enough that it can feel like they're family, not just friends. In mine, we celebrate not just book releases, but pregnancies, births, birthdays, non-writing wins, and so much more. The first 20 minutes or so of our video calls is catching up, and if we're not careful, the whole call would turn into a social thing rather than a let's improve our writing thing. Tight-knit writing groups exist to keep us writing, to keep us growing, and to keep us connected. I can honestly say I wouldn't be where I am without my writing groups. If you're struggling to find a writers group, I'd say the best place to connect with people is at in-person writers conferences. I know they can be expensive, but there's just something about face-to-face connection that creates a different sort of bond than online-only groups do. And that's not to say you can't form meaningful connections with writers you've only interacted with online. I have a lot of those, and I have really strong connections with those people. But even with that, once I meet those people in person, it clicks differently. If you're just starting to look for a writers group and you can swing an in-person conference, then absolutely go and find your people. But if all you can do right now is online, that too is perfectly acceptable. The point is that you just need to find a group of people who has the same level of interest and commitment to writing that you do. The other cool thing about online is that there are a lot of online-only options now for conferences. So if you can't swing that in person, definitely check those out. And a lot of those will include community engagement, so you can meet people even when you're online. But no matter where you find your people, do your best to engage with the community rather than lurk. Lurking is fine at first to get a feel for what the group is like, but to really get the most out of any community, no matter its size, you'll need to step out of your comfort zone, assuming that peopling is out of your comfort zone. I'd wager it's out of most of ours, since we writers tend to be overwhelmingly introverted. One last thing to consider for a writing group. Do your best to find one where the other writers are either at or ahead of your current level, and not like miles ahead. I don't think it would be necessarily very helpful for an unpublished author to be in the same writing group as someone with a ginormous backlist or whose every launch lands them on bestseller lists. The best groups are made up of people who are around or about at the same point in their journey, which goes back to the point I made about coming up together with your fellow writers. So that means if you are a somewhat newer writer and you are looking for a writing group, look for a group that has people who are closer to publishing than you are. And if you are already published, look for a group that has people who have published one to a few more books than you have. The point is finding people at or just ahead of you rather than people who are lower than you on the level of skill, is I guess a way of saying it. In any case, I hope this has been a helpful discourse. That's it for today's episode. I recently started a SUBSTACK to share podcast scripts, essentially the transcripts of these episodes, and you can find the link in the episode description. Those scripts are free to access, but if you'd like to support the podcast and watch unedited interview recordings, please consider subscribing. Thanks for joining me, and remember, the first draft is supposed to be garbage. The Novel Writing Podcast is a production of Colleen Mitchell Writes. For more writing resources, including Curios, Tally Inc. author services, and the 60-day novel writing challenge, check out the links in the description.